Hey guys, this is the third and final. Let me fix my camera so you can see more of me in my little cameo here. This is the third and final video of this cycles of life and how it directly relates to what we're going through now. So if you've been watching the rest of this, you'll see that we've talked about how space and time are identically related and they're relative. The further out you look, the larger the cycles get, as you look inward, the closer the cycles get. And so you're just switching the field back and forth because you've got on the top side it's pouring out on the top side and then drawing in on the bottom side. And that switching action is what determines our basically our annual cycles. So as the Earth is rotated more towards the sun on average, depending on where you're at on the Earth, that is creating more heat. So that's giving you spring and summertime. Whereas if it's turned more away from the sun, it's drawing more energy out of that region, which is creating a fall and winter time. So you're creating a negative polarity versus a positive polarity. Now that's a tendency. It's not a pure positive polarity and a pure negative polarity. It's just a tendency that's more creative versus more attractive. Two sides of the same coin. One isn't better than the other. It's identical. And in order for this reality to exist, you have to pull it apart into double poles, which creates the masculine and feminine, the attractive and the creative, or the provider, you could say. That's why generally in society we talk about men as providers and the women have been caretakers, or the attractive quality. So men are attracted to the feminine and women are attracted to the provider. Generally speaking, right? This is a general tendency, but it's a real function of reality. It's the state of our reality and how it works. And that cycle of how it switches back and forth in your own body determines how you are interacting with the people around you. If you are purely consuming, if all you're doing is consuming, you're going to be pulling from your environment a bunch. And if you're purely creative, all you are doing is providing for your, but there has to be some kind of interchange there, or else, right? I mean, I use Jesus as the example. Somebody that became a pure creator, but fell so out of balance with the system that they were just totally jealous of him, right? He became this giant shining light of pure creative energy that they killed him for. But that was his story to tell you how, that if he became the father in a sense on this planet. So let's go to the next slide. So galaxy with a positive tendency. Oh, sorry, wrong way. In my camera, it looks the opposite way. So a galaxy with a positive tendency will be emitting light. A toroidal field or an awareness with a negative tendency will look like a black hole because it's pulling more light on average than it's emitting light. Now they've shown that black holes also emit light, but they emit a very small amount of light from the center of it. So it's just a tendency of the switching motion of that toroidal field. And so actually you're looking at a long cycle. And this is something that I have just realized very recently. I used to think that maybe a black hole was permanently that way, but it's not. Even our galaxy is not that way. It's just like your biofield. It's on a frequency where eventually it will switch into a negative polarity and start pulling more than it's providing. But it does that over time. That's the frequency and it's a much longer cycle than our own frequency. If you look at our own biofield, you're switching back and forth, right? Now, if you stay, the tendency is going to go roll positive or negative. Either you're consuming more or you're creating more. If you're creating more, you're going to emit more light, right? You're impacting your environment more. You become more creative. You align with the creator more. If you are more attractive, or you're pulling more energy from your environment, then you will start to emit less light. You're trying to draw people towards you. Ye are light of the world, right? And so those tendencies, and which is why you'll see on average, women have a tendency to want to go towards a warmer climate that is providing more heat, right? Where men actually don't mind getting into a colder climate because they are providing more heat. It's a it's a simple tendency of nature where the masculine has a tendency for providing energy, and the feminine has a tendency to for attracting energy. Now, this is just a general tendency. This isn't true in every circumstance. I've met lots of women that are more provider by nature, and men who are more attractive by nature, where you have more masculine energy versus feminine energy. But our winter months are an example where the it's a mirror image where more heat is being sucked out of there, and so it's a slowing down of the growth cycle, and then the growth cycle expands when it starts receiving more heat. You're receiving currency or you're giving currency. So our current system, because of the way it's structured, it creates a hierarchical order that reverses the flow of more of a black hole type tendency. We're in a negative pole of the galaxy, which is why our hierarchical systems that you see try to pull energy towards the center, right? It's like black hole. Whereas if we're switching to a positive tendency, then it switches around where you're trying to provide from the inside. It becomes more service based, where you're always serving what's out there, and that is how growth happens, right? That's how your body grows. That's you surrender and serve your environment. So your environment's actually controlling you, and you're providing for the environment. If you swap that around and then force your environment to provide for you, you're switching the tendency. So you have to, in order to do that, now think about this, that you have a lot of people that are unseen, that are controlling currency, that are forcing the environment to provide for them. We're in a negative polarity, but that's changing. That has to flip. It can only last so long. It's part of a natural cycle. There's nothing evil about it. When people talk about good and evil, that's all illusion. It's just the mentality, because it feels like you're going through pain if you're being sucked on all the time, right? Because it's the pain of that negative process before you pop into the positive growth cycle. Just part of nature. It's literally part of nature. And these long and short cycles, if you look at them from a holistic perspective, there isn't anything that isn't holistic. It's all whole. It's all God, and the only way that we can come out of source is to create that negative polarity to pull us apart. And so you create cycles to emulate space-time in order to experience one another over time and slowly grow back together. Now you can also slowly grow apart if you're heading in the direction of moving towards a negative polarity. But to my way of thinking, on average, the galaxy and the universe doesn't look like it's doing that, because growth and evolution happens over time. If you look at the geological record, you'll see that organisms slowly get more complex to move more energy, to become more creative and impact their environment more profoundly, right? So you're moving more towards the creator, back towards oneness. You move from oneness into conflict, where you're being sucked off of and sucking off each other, and moving back into creator mind, where you're providing for each other over time. But that it's a cycle. So even at the end of the next 13,000 year cycle, this planet will fall back into a negative tendency or an attractive tendency. Hope this makes sense for you guys. But we're moving into a more creative cycle. So all the stuff I'm talking about here obviously will be forgotten about in 13,000 years, more than likely, because you end up going through the field again, or the galactic plane, and then everything kind of gets blasted apart so that you can go through that negative cycle again to relearn that you are a creator, and then become an even more amazing creation, right? I mean, it's an evolutionary cycle. What's really interesting, and I can't remember if I put it in the last video, is that when you break up the sun's path around the galaxy, if it's 230 million years into quarter cycles, the last quarter cycle was a major evolutionary change 66 million years ago. So, I can't say for certain whether or not this is a major evolutionary cycle that we're getting ready to go to as far as the human race is concerned, where maybe we evolve into something that can move way more energy and become much more creative, instead of falling into that negative tendency. Because eventually you fall into that positive, when you're matching larger toroidal fields and you're expanding your consciousness. Now you have beings that are galactic beings that are falling into a positive polarity over long periods of time. This lines up with people's testimonies of interactions with extraterrestrials that say that they're 3, 4, 5,000 years old, and that they remember in their history when they went through something exactly the same way that we're going through right now. So hope that makes sense for you guys. And well, so before I go, I want to explain how that it relates to the business world. And so we have to ground that and understand what's going on in the business community. That's why it's getting harder and harder to sell something, because you're trying to pull from your environment. So you have to provide something. You're trying to get everybody to line up, or you're not trying to. It's going to happen whether I'm here or not. It's a force of nature. When you see what's going on around you, everything is slowing down. That is what's happening. It's slowing down to switch the tendency to become more providing than receiving. And it has to do that way. All that money has to start flowing in the opposite direction. And eventually the money goes away for 13,000 years until the polarity switches, and then possibly currency or some other form, something else will take form that takes the place of that. It's hard to say what that is going to be. But when you look at the business structures the way they're structured now, that hierarchical order controls from the inside out, which is why it's pulling, and that's why the people in the center are making more money than the person in the middle. Now you can swap that to push that back into society so that you're providing more from the inside out. I have ideas of a way to do that, because you still have to provide for yourself. You just become a minimalist. And to be perfectly honest, I don't need much, right? I mean, none of us, when you really think about it, you don't really need that much. When you're switching your tendency back from creative, or back from attractive to creative, I don't need 10 houses. I mean, that just doesn't make sense, right? So you're, as long as you're switching that polarity back and you're providing for, and then making sure that the control circuit is correct in that hierarchical order, where people are controlling who is, as a group, selecting their leaders instead of having leaders be selected for them. That's what's happening in our society right now, right? Because of that monetary system. All the energy is being pulled into spot from the population, and then that system is controlling who is dictated in that hierarchical order. That has to be is being automatically reversed organically, whether we like it or not. There's nothing that I can do. I can just teach about it. It's going to happen regardless. There's nothing anybody can do about it. Now, if you understand what's happening, you can teach about it and be on the front end and say, look, this is how we need to start restructuring your business in order for it to grow. So, love you guys. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you on the next one.